So we have all of our view ports and view titles all labeled and set up correctly within our paper space here. Um, our first page includes our plan view, includes our elevation view, and the second page here is going to include all of our section views through the upper cabinets as well as the lower cabinets or base cabinets here as well. So as we get into plotting this, we're going to kind of refer back to the standard document that we had pulled up. Let me get that back up again. We're going to be referring to what we discussed here in terms of what is expected as far as the dimensions and the material calls go on the drawing. So before we get too much further in, if you want to go back and re-look at that, you can. I'm just going to go through this step by step as far as like how this typically would be done. And the more you do these cabinet drawings, the more it's going to be more familiar to you and the easier it'll be to remember all those different standards. So the one thing you can do is there are going to be two methods of going about dimensioning your drawing. So, and even before we get into that, let's talk about what we're going to do here. Game plan wise, what I want to do is do a few pass-throughs of this drawing. We are going to go through the first pass-through, which is going to be dimensioning all the views. So we're going to dimension every view as we go through. Then we're going to come back to the beginning of the drawing and we're going to put on the material labels, any hardware labels that we need, and any notes that we need. Third pass through, let's see, what else do we need to do? Third pass through, we're going to put on the elevation calls and the section calls, and if there are any detail calls that we need to add, we're going to add those in as well. And then the fourth pass through, that's going to be us. When we get to the end, we're going to plot the drawing and we're going to review it on our own using a standard checklist, which I'll get to you here as well. So let's make our way through the first pass through, which is dimensioning everything. And like I mentioned earlier, there are two ways you can go about dimensioning this. I'm okay with either one. Whatever actually fits you better is fine. I prefer to dimension everything through my viewports in the papers. Well, not in the paper space, but like through the viewport, you're putting dimensions in your model space. You can also dimension everything in your model space too. The only thing that I would really recommend if you go about doing it that way is that as you are dimensioning everything in your model space, you do have to make sure that you are set to the correct annotative scale on this drop-down menu here for that view. If I was to dimension my, let's say here, I'm going to type in dim linear, which we'll talk about these in a sec too. If I was to start putting dimensions on my plan view here at the incorrect scale, because right now I'm at 1.5 inches equals a foot, what you're going to see is if I go back to my paper space, if I'm using the incorrect scale, that dimension will not appear in this viewport. And that's because that viewport is set to 1 inch equals a foot only. If you do use the correct scale, of course, it will do the opposite. You're going to actually see that dimension here in your viewport. But it's something to keep in mind because if you dimension an entire view using the incorrect scale, there is ways to go about fixing it, but it is kind of a little bit of a mess and you want to try to avoid that anyway. So one thing you can do, like I said, you can dimension everything in your model space, but you do have to be very, very careful about making sure you're using the correct scale on the view that you're dimensioning. If you do dimension through your viewport, like if I double click in here and I start dimensioning my view and then double click outside of it, that will automatically set your annotative scale to match the viewport as you're dimensioning. So you don't have to remember to change it. And in fact, the other thing that's beneficial to doing it this way is that you can actually see if the dimension is going to get cut off by the viewport or not. And what I mean by that is if you put a dimension or something in here and you put it like over here, if it's outside of that viewport line, it's not going to show anything past that viewport line. So if you're dimensioning in your model space over here, it's very easy to make that mistake because you can't actually see where the viewport is here. But if I throw a dimension in there and I come back here, obviously you can see that those red lines are part of the dimension, but you can't see what the dimension is because it's over here somewhere behind that viewport. So there is a hurdle here though, of course, too. There can't all be sunshine and daisies. So if you're dimensioning in your paper space, you want to be sure that you're not throwing dimensions in your actual paper space. So like here, I put that dimension down right there, but if you notice, I'm not actually inside of that viewport. So if I go to try to highlight that dimension now that I'm in that viewport, it won't work because it's on top of the drawing instead of inside of the drawing. So be kind of careful about that too. So just a couple things to look at before you really get into dimensioning everything. But what we're going to do now is we're going to actually label the dimensions on the print. And so, sorry, one sec here. Okay, I'm back. All right, so we were about to start actually dimensioning our prints. So what we're going to do here is we're going to start with the plan view first. So plan view, like we talked about earlier, we need to provide a depth dimension on the countertop as well as a width dimension on that countertop too. Those are the two required dimensions that we need for this type of view. And then again, we did mention a little bit briefly as well that if you have upper cabinets, you want to make sure that you have this dimension from the wall to the front of your upper cabinet too. So going back into our AutoCAD, let's go ahead and throw these dimensions in here. If you are, another thing you want to try to do too, if you have dimensions here that you're working on putting in AutoCAD, try to make sure that they don't actually overlap your drawing or don't sit on top of your drawing as much as possible. It's kind of hard to see what's happening here because the grid's kind of on top of everything. But one thing that you want to make sure is to make sure your drawing looks very nice and clean. You don't want to throw dimensions like your countertop depth. We're going to put that in somewhere else, but you wouldn't want to put that like right here because it's going to end up getting buried. And when you go to actually do the print preview of that, we'll show you what that kind of looks like. It's kind of confusing, and not that it's like super confusing, but it's kind of not very crystal clear as to what's happening here. So instead of putting like a countertop depth dimension right there like I have, what I would rather see is putting that dimension down below like right here, because that is going to be a lot cleaner and it's off of your view. So that way it's not covering anything up, it's not interfering with anything. And also when you go to print this out, you got to remember too, everything on the paper is going to print in black and white. And so if you were to print this, it's not going to look exactly the same as what you have in AutoCAD. In AutoCAD, we have all these different like rainbow bright colors of these different things, which help us differentiate if it's a dimension or a line. So one thing to keep note of, though, is that everything we print is going to be in black and white. So make sure that you try to avoid having a lot of overlap and a lot of interference between your drawing and your notes or your dimensions, because that's going to help you immensely with getting all the information out to the people after us in this department, to the people over in our listing department, our project management department, and the installers and the shop. So keeping all that information as clean as possible is the goal. So what we're going to do is, I guess before we even get into dimensioning, I probably should mention this. We need to go over the different dimensioning commands that you have in AutoCAD. So one thing I'm going to do is I'm going to pull up that supplemental document that I've been referring to here. It is inside of it's inside of the training folder here. But I'm going to pull it up because it has a list of AutoCAD commands in there. Oops, not this one, sorry. There's a list of the AutoCAD commands in there that are going to be super helpful for when you go to dimension something here. There is a few different AutoCAD commands that, oh, it's right here, cool. A few different AutoCAD commands that are going to be super helpful for you. Those are on this page here, and I have them labeled here with 2D, 3D, plotting, and just general commands. So we're mainly focused here on the plotting part of it right now. So you can see right here, these are the quick type in commands for what these different things are. You have dim aligned, you have dim angular, dim arc, dim break, dim continue, dim diameter. There's quite a few. You're going to be using dim linear probably the most. That is a command that makes straight runs of dimensions. So that's the one that I actually have been using already. Whoops, I didn't mean to do that. Let me go ahead and try to split screen this. Maybe I can keep this open with AutoCAD and try to make this easier to see what we're doing here. All right, that'll work. That'll work. All right, so here we go. In AutoCAD, your dimensions are all in this annotation tab up here. You can see that right here. There is a newer age AutoCAD dimensioning tool that you can use. That's going to pretty much be a combination of all these different dimensioning tools here. The older school method ones that are here, these are all also standard dimensioning tools that you have available to you. Going through them one by one, dim linear is going to be a command that allows you to pull a dimension only at 90-degree angles. So much like your ortho snap, when you have that turned on, that is only going to allow you to run straight dimensions. Aligned is going to allow you to make dimensions on an angle or at a different, well, aligned, as in it's aligned to another line. Similar to what they show here on this example, it's going to be able to pull a dimension at an angle or a funky angle. Below that, you have angular. It's not as commonly used, but if you have a wall that's on an angle, a countertop that's at an angle, you might want to use this here to show what that angle is. That's going to be the degree angle between two lines. Arc length is used mostly for curved objects like circular furniture, other things like that. Surprised there's not a preview for that. Oh, there it is right there. Okay, so yeah, anything that's got a curve to it, that is pretty much giving you the perimeter dimension of that curve. So that is helpful when it comes to doing curved furniture pieces and curved countertops, but we don't really have that here, so it's not going to apply to this drawing. You have your radius dimension, which is going to give you the radii of each, like an arc. If you had an arc or a circle, you could do a radius dimension there. If you have an actual circle that's a full circle, you'll want to use the diameter. That is just the same thing, just pulling the diameter of that circle. We don't ever really use ordinate dimensioning, which I don't think I have it on this list anyway because of that. And jogged really isn't here either. That's more of a mechanical drafting type of tool there, so we don't really have that in our notes for this. Ones that we have not looked at though is dim break, dim continue, dim jogline, and that's about it. Yeah, these other ones are only going to apply to other things. Really, these don't apply to what we're dealing with here. So we'll talk about that here though real quick. So if you had something with a break line, which we'll talk why break lines are used here shortly, but the dim jogline, that's like if you have a break line, meaning that you have something like this dimension is being shown to represent the entire depth of that countertop, but maybe your drawing has a break line in it to break up that countertop, so it's not showing the full countertop. That would be where a dim jogline would be used. Now, if you have two dimensions that are crisscrossing, like for example, if I had something here that I was dimensioning, a dim break may be of use to you. Dim break is going to allow you to break a dimension where the other one crosses over it, which helps kind of break up that to make it look a little easier to see what's happening, just to overlay one dimension over another. That is a dim break. I'll talk about dim continue here shortly, but for the most part, you're going to be using dim linear for a lot of these, and so that's why I have the arrow pointing to it right there on my side screen. Dim linear, again, that's just a straight dimension. For cabinets, that is pretty common and is going to be used a lot. Now, one thing that actually makes a really big visual difference with your drawing, if you're a very visual person, is that if you want all your dimensions to stay off of your view the same I guess offset, if you want to think about it that way. Like right now, I have this dimension 6 inches from the edge of the wall to where the dimension sits. This one is just random. I just dropped it in. So from the wall to here, it's like 10.5 inches. Now, one thing that I like to do is I got really good at this, and it's something that I'm sure you can as well, is if you use the line command, you can use a temporary line, drawing that 6 inches down, clicking on your dimension, clicking on this endpoint, and then sliding it up. So now that dimension is 6 inches from this view, and then you can just delete that temporary line when you're done. It's kind of more of a nitpicky thing, and really, like, I'm not going to require you to do that, but at the same time, it is highly suggested that you do, because if you do, your drawing is going to look a lot cleaner if everything is in line with one another. So definitely recommend doing that, even if it seems like overkill, but it will make your drawing look a lot nicer if you do have everything nice and offset the same way all the way around. Same thing goes for here. So right now I've got a dimension for my countertop. That's 161 inches, so we'll probably need to add a field joint to that. I have my dimension from the counter to the wall here, and because this is for equipment, we need to double click on this dimension, and we're going to write VWE on there for verify with equipment. And then I'm also going to provide a dimension that spans from wall to wall. That is going to be really important, because what that's going to do is that's going to end up being our VIF dimension. That means that the installer or the superintendent is going to work hand in hand with our project manager, and they're going to take a tape measure out there in the field and verify the actual opening of this wall here. So that again, that is a VIF for verify in field. And this here is a VWE for verify with equipment. All right. Like mentioned though, we do need to add a field joint in the counter, I'm sure, because I'm 100% sure that that stone material that's being used is not going to be 161 inches long. We should confirm with the material log to see what that stone actually comes in first. Sorry, try to pull that over. I don't know why it's fighting me so bad. Okay, there we go. So let's go to the material log. Let's find our job real quick and see what we've got. And again, on our drawing from the architect, they were calling that countertop out to be SS1. Okay, SS1 on project legislative office building. SS1 is right here. It is available in a total length of 144 inches long. So we definitely need a field joint in that countertop. Where to put that field joint actually does matter a little bit. A lot of times you might think I'll just throw it in the center of the countertop, and sometimes that's okay. But really, it might be better to line it up with the edge of a cabinet. An architect is going to see that, and they're going to actually want you to do that anyway. So we're going to go back to our model space, and we're going to add that in real quick. It's really easy to do. So what I'm going to do is start by looking at the elevation view. I'm going to take a line in AutoCAD, and because this is roughly the center of these cabinets and the center of that counter, what I would like to do is put the field joint in the counter right there. So that's right in between two cabinets. Then what I want to do with that, because I have that all labeled right there, it's all laid out very nice. What I'm going to do is copy this over using the Control C and Control V. That's the front edge of my countertop, but I need to place that field joint in the exact same spot in the plan view. So what I'm going to do to make sure that I get that right is I'm going to use the rotate command, spin this around, and then I'm going to line up this rectangle that we just pulled over with the rectangle of our counter, which I think I need to extend this 1/4 inch still too. I've been meaning to do that here for that overhang. Anyways, so then our field joint needs to come in here. So I'm going to take a line straight from this here that we pulled in from the elevation view, and then use that grip point to bring it back so that way it's touching the back wall and the front edge of my counter. We'll delete these, they're no longer needed. But anyway, that's going to be where that field joint is located, which will be right in between the two cabinets that we had right here. And again, the reason we're doing that is not only because it's going to be hard to get that in the building at 161 inches there, but it's going to also be very difficult and actually in this case impossible to get that material that long. So we'll go back into our viewport. We're going to adjust these dimensions now that we have that information. And I'm going to use either dim continue or dim linear here. I'm going to click on this dimension and extend it out to here. So that way we can see now that we have two separate slabs for the countertop, one at 77 and 21/30 seconds, and one at 83 and 19/30 seconds. All right, so, and then this would be your field joint here. So to label a field joint, it's really easy. What you're gonna do is you're gonna type in text here, and you're gonna make a text box, and you're gonna write FJ for field joint. Then you're just going to take that text box and you're going to line it up with the edge of your dimension here, just like this. So it's going to line up with where that dimension meets the field joint. Just like that. I threw it on the dimension layer too real quick just to make sure it's all the same color. But anyways, yeah, so that's labeling that this in fact is a field joint here. All right, we have our countertop depth. We have our countertop dimensions, our VWE here, and then our overall span from wall to wall with a VIF included on that. That's all that I'm going to put in here in the plan view for dimensions. So we're going to move on to the elevation view next. All right, like we did before, we're going to start with the cabinets here below. And we're going to go dim linear. And we're going to measure a dimension from the outside edge of that cabinet to the outside edge of this next cabinet here. Again, there are a few lines here, so be careful you're grabbing the correct one. You want to make sure you're at this bottom corner here where the two cabinets meet. And then same here with this one too. This is part of your door technically, so you don't want to snap to that. You want to make sure you're snapping to the outside edge of your cabinet box. All right, like we did in the plan view, I am pretty crazy about making sure my dimensions all are the same offset from my view. So I'm drawing a line 6 inches down to match. And I'm going to snap it right to there. And then the beauty of this is now we can use the dim continue command. Dim continue will start wherever you left off. So if I threw a dimension in here, dim continue is going to allow me to continue dimensioning based on that last dimension. So if I go over here, I can just kind of connect the dots all the way across. And this will allow me to quickly dimension everything I need to dimension in my drawing, all the way from one side to the other. I use that quite a bit whenever there is a lot going on, like a lot of like little dimensions like this. Just like our example drawing we looked at in Bluebeam, this is going to read 1 inch, but it's also going to say filler on it. So to change that, you're just going to double click on the 1 inch, go to the end of that dimension, and then type in filler. Okay. Now, because the architect did have these as EQ, I think it would be a wise decision for us to actually write EQ after these dimensions as well. So I'm going to do that here. What that will mean is that if later on, you know how we have that VIF dimension up top, if that dimension shrinks or grows from 196 between the two walls, that means that these cabinets will have to also change too to fit within that space. So when you think about it, the project manager is going to release the drawing with those new field dimensions once they know what they are. And when they do that, if we put these EQs on here, that's going to make sure that they understand that if they grow or shrink this elevation, that those cabinets have to stay equal to each other. Even if, I mean, you can't just change one of them, they all have to change if you change one of them. So, all right. One last thing here, when you're dealing with base cabinets, the base trim should always run all the way through. That does not include ADA cabinets with that though, but standard base cabinets, if you have base trim in front of them, it's going to go all the way from the edge of the cabinet to the wall. So in order to do that, we're going to use another wipeout, just like we did before with the sink. We're going to go wipeout, and we're going to trace around the base trim here. So starting right there at this edge, and then I'm going to go all the way to the other side, and I need to go to the actual wall. The filler is always going to stop at the top of the base trim. So just like that, the filler will stop here. It's not going to go all the way to the floor. It's going to stop right there. So make sure that you catch that on future drawings too. I'll keep an eye on it for you in the drafting check process, but that's really, really important too. All right, so we've got those base cabinets dimensioned. Let's go and dimension the upper cabinets next. Dim linear. We're going to go from left to right, just like before. And because, again, I'm really crazy about making sure my dimensions are all even, I'm taking a temporary line up from the top of my view to 6 inches there to line up my dimension with that. All right, so now we're going to go dim continue. And we're going to snap a dimension to the inside of, or to the side of each cabinet carcass. Again, you're not going to dimension every single cabinet door. We're just dimensioning the cabinet box itself from left to right. All right. Now, let's go ahead and add our notes. So again, like down below, we're going to double click on this dimension, write in filler. We're going to do that over here too. Double click on this dimension, write in filler. And these cabinets here are all going to be EQ. So we need to write EQ after the dimension there. Whoops, there we go. All right. And that just leaves the vertical dimensions here. And going back to that standard document that we have here, we need to make sure that we are not going overboard with dimensioning, but we also want to make sure that we're dimensioning enough. So when you're dimensioning the heights on your elevation view, this is what we're going to be providing here. We're going to go dim linear. We're going to go from the floor to the top of the counter. And again, making sure that I'm all within that same 6 inches out from my view. And then I'm going to go dim continue. I'm going to continue my dimension up, snapping from the bottom, or sorry, top of the counter to the bottom of the cabinet, and then bottom of the cabinet to the top of the cabinet. And then here, I am going to put this in here. This is actually a not a filler. It will be called a reveal. So when you have cabinets that are almost touching the top of well, they're touching the ceiling, we need to make sure we put that 3/4 inch filler between the top of the upper cabinet and the ceiling, if there's a ceiling right above it. Okay. So now that we have those on there, one last thing height-wise that I want to show, because these cabinets are going floor to ceiling, we want to show a dimension that actually tells us what the ceiling height is going to be. So I'm going to throw that right here. And right now you can see I got some overlap happening right there. I'm going to try my best to fix that as much as possible without getting too crazy. So I'm going to move that 3/4 reveal up here to avoid that from interfering with this dimension here. All right. Now, a couple other things we want to do is anytime you have a dimension going from the finished floor to the top of something, you're going to label it with an AFF. And that just means above finished floor, meaning that this is where the floor starts. That's where the countertop is. So above the actual finished floor. We'll do the same thing with this 94-inch dimension. This is going to say VIF as well, though, and then AFF after the dimension. It says verify in field on there because that is the floor to ceiling height. So we are restricted to whatever that dimension is between the floor and the ceiling there. On this side, we have another cabinet that is not dimensioned all the way through, and we need to make sure that we get that. So we're going to throw in dimensions going from the floor to the underside of this cabinet here. And again, make sure that that is all the same, offset from the view. There we go. Cool. There we go. All right. And then we'll go dim continue, and we're going to continue this up. Same deal as before. We are going to label this filler, or sorry, reveal at the ceiling. Okay. And then here, because this is above the finished floor, this needs to say AFF. But it also does need to say VWE because there is equipment that is going below that cabinet, and we want to make sure that equipment actually fits within the space provided. The same thing can be said here too for this dimension here. We didn't put one in, but it would actually be helpful to have this. We should throw a dimension in here. Whoops, make sure that's lined up. There we go. And we're going to write VWE on this as well, meaning that we want to make sure that refrigerator actually fits there before we call that done. Okay. I think we're pretty good on this view. The only thing I want to make sure that we add is I want to make sure that we add another finished end call right here. That way the shop knows and listing department knows that this has to have a finished end on this cabinet here. Because if it doesn't, this is going to get out to the field and it's not going to look pretty, I can tell you that. So we're going to add text here. Whoops, text. There we go. Oh my gosh, I'm messing this all up. All right, text. There we go. FE, that's all we need. So this is going to go right to the side of our cabinet, kind of like that. And we're just going to change this to read the dimension layer, just like that. So it'll be FE. In fact, I might actually put the dots after it to match what's going on below, kind of like that. And just slide it over a tiny bit. Okay, perfect. Again, I just want to make sure that that gets caught because there is a portion of this cabinet that is going to be semi-exposed, and so it needs to have a finished end on it. Okay, so dimensionally, I think we're good here. We already have the wall-to-wall dimension for the width on the plan view, which is also on this page here. So we're good there. Oh, one more thing. We need to put a dimension for the overhang right here. Almost forgot. We're going to throw that right there, real snug right next to the cabinet. And it's just going to say 1/4 inch overhang. I'm going to also move it over here, I think, too. Maybe keep it a little bit off of the other drawing as much as possible. Otherwise, we're good on this. So moving on, we're going to go over to our section views and start dimensioning those. These are going to go pretty quick because once you draw the dimensions on one view, for the base cabinets at least, it's going to be copy paste from there. All right, dimensionally here, what we're looking for is we need to provide a dimension for the reveal, although it is provided on the other page here too. I want to make sure it's included here as well. That is your 3/4 inch reveal. Make sure that that's clear, that that's why that's there, and it has a purpose. And we're going to go dim continue. We're going to label the rest of the door. That'll be your cabinet door. There's no gaps here to dimension, so we're good on that. Because these cabinet sections are on a separate page from the plan view, we do need to make sure that we provide the depth dimension on this drawing somewhere for these two. So I'm going to put that here. That's your depth there. And then a couple other things we could do. Well, one other thing we could do is we want to make sure that we do dimension the valance here too, because that can vary from drawing to drawing. So this needs to actually have a dimension applied to it here as well. I'm going to try my best to make it fit. So I'm kind of doing one of these little numbers where I drag the dimension down a little further below. That way it has a place that's not overlapping anything. It's good to go where it is. So, all right, that's all we need for this one. Now what I can do though, because this upper cabinet and the one adjacent to it have a lot of the same dimensions, I can actually take these dimensions using the copy command and a common base point, so the front of my reveal, for example. I can come over here and just paste these dimensions right on top of this view. I do have to adjust the cabinet door height, of course, but like for the most part, this is going to work out really quickly. So we can copy this over as well. Copying that right over there. Okay, moving on. Let's go to our base cabinets now. And again, just like we talked about for the upper cabinets, these section views are on a separate drawing from the plan view, like a separate sheet. And because of that, we want to make sure that these cabinets have the countertop depth dimensioned here too. Going back to what we talked about here, we did have a couple of dimensions that were not included in this document, but are going to be required for cabinets going forward. So we're going to go and dimension from floor to top of cabinet carcass, just like this. And again, I'm going to set this off the view, the same distance that we've been doing for everything. We'll make that 6 inches out. Just like that. And then we'll delete that line. You can write an AFF on this too, because this is technically at finish, or sorry, above finished floor. So that is where that is going to reside. We're going to go dim linear, and we're going to go from the back of the cabinet to the front of the toe kick now. We're going to drop in that dimension here and make sure everything is snapped correctly. Okay. All right. And then this is a little bit different because this toe kick doesn't actually touch the floor. One thing that we're going to do is we're going to put a dimension here on the inside of the cabinet. I did mention before you don't want to put dimensions on your drawing, but sometimes you have to. We're going to label this as a 1/2 inch gap. And that is going to go right here inside of that cabinet to represent that there is going to be an intentional gap between the base trim and the floor there. All right, so from there to there, we can dimension the rest of the toe kick, so that'll be 4 inches up, technically. And then to continue, we're going to continue these dimensions up from the top of the toe kick to the top of the door, that little 1/4 inch gap, and the 1.5 inch apron on the countertop. All right, and then you can even label this as gap on here too for 1/4 inch gap. It's an intentional gap to make sure the door has enough clearance to open and close. All right, so from there, a lot of these dimensions are going to be the same. So we're going to copy all of these ones as well as these ones here. Might as well copy all of them except for the gap. We'll go copy, and we're going to paste these over here. And I'm just going to run through and paste these on all of these views. We will have to modify them a little bit, but not too terribly, really. So like these ones are all pretty good. That's pretty good. This one here is going to vary a little bit because we have multiple fronts instead of just one. So we got to dimension each one of those individually. We're going to go dim continue, and we're going to go, if your dim continue doesn't work right, like if it's doing something like this, and you want to make sure that you're making it work correctly, if you hit S for select, when you're in that command, it'll let you pick a dimension to continue off of. So I'm going to select this dimension here, and I'm just going to follow these points all the way up. Okay. And then again, like we did before, we're going to label all these to say gap after the dimension. If you have a whole bunch of dimensions you're trying to add a note to, an easy way to do that is if you highlight those dimensions and you go to your properties pane over here, there's a text override down here. And if you want to add a note after your dimension, what you're going to do is you're going to do the less than, greater than symbols, and then space, and you're going to put your note after that. The less than, greater than symbols are going to represent the formula that it's using to show the dimension. And then the text after that is the text that you want to add to your dimension. So if you put those less than, greater thans there, that's going to represent the dimension itself. Then what I'm going to do is actually just use the stretch command, since I got to move all of these. I'm going to stretch all of them at the same time. And I want to line them up with that dimension up top to make sure everything looks nice and even like that. Okay, so our drawer boxes have dimensions on them already, so we're good there. This drawer box does have a dimension on it, but I think we also want to add a dimension for the overall depth of that as well. So we're going to add that here. And then one more thing we do need to add, I kind of forgot about this, and it's something that is pretty critical when it comes to a trash cabinet like this, is we actually need a detail that goes along with this. That detail is going to be the top-down view of that trash can cutout. We're going to put that up here. So temporarily, what I'm going to do is use the copy command. I'm going to highlight the view title and the viewport for this view, and I'm going to put it right on top. We're going to change the label here, and we're going to make it say detail, and we're going to change this to say A instead of 6. And we're going to label this to say detail, like I said. So detail at laminate casework. Now, this is one of those cases where the architect is not going to have a detail of this because this is a on-site company standard. So because of that, you're going to change out the arc reference here as well, and you're just going to write NA for that. Okay, now we need to add that detail. So what we're going to do is go back to the model space, go back to our detail area down below, and actually I'll start here first. Let's go into our tool palettes, and under casework, under, let's see, cabinet sections, there is 3 trash can cutout details that are predefined for you here. You're just going to click on the one that pertains to the garbage can you're using. In this case, it's the Rubbermaid 2957. And we're going to resize this detail to match the dimensions of our cabinet below. So first we need to know we are dealing with an 18-inch wide trash cabinet. So we're going to go over here, and we're going to change the width of this to 18, just like that. Then we need to change the depth. So to do that, what I like to do is actually use the move command and kind of line that up with my view below. Then I take this grip point here, which allows you to resize that cabinet, and I'm going to snap it right to the wall right there. And then the last thing you want to do is the drawer box is actually shown, it's hard to tell, but it's actually kind of inside of the back of the cabinet right now. So we need to shrink it back just a little bit, so that way it matches what's going on in the section below. Then once all of our dimensions for this detail have been adjusted correctly to match our other views, we're going to take this and we're going to paste it down below into our details. Okay, so then we're going to go back to our paper space now. We're going to go and double click in this viewport, unlock it, and we're going to go find that detail now. So that detail is down here. We're going to zoom in, and I'm going to set this to 1.5 inches = a foot and drop it right here, right above the view title. All right, so there we go. And we're going to lock that viewport just like we've been doing for the rest of them. All right. I also like to stack these right above each other too, because it kind of represents that, hey, I'm looking at a trash can here, I'm looking at a trash can here. So that kind of makes sense why they're right above each other there. All right, so we have completed the dimensional part of the first pass through of our drawing. Second pass through we're going to do is we're going to label all of the finishes on the print. So to do that, we're going to need to have the architectural drawing pulled up, and we're going to need to refer to what they have for their finishes. So upper cabinets, like we talked about earlier, are PL1, lower cabinets are PL2, and the countertop itself is SS1. So as we go through and label this, we're going to place one material call on the countertop here in the plan view. I need to go to plot tools here in the on-site annotation toolbar. we're going to go here to finish symbol and place that right inside of our drawing. As soon as you place it, it's going to prompt you to ask what that finish is. You click on this little icon here. It lets you modify what is in that bubble. So we need to label this to match what we're calling it. And we are calling SS1 SS1 conveniently. So we're going to go back here and type in SS1. This bubble also has an adjustment on it too. If you'd like to adjust it to any dimension you need, go ahead and feel free to do that. It doesn't really matter too much, but I do like to make sure these are all even numbers too. So I made mine, I did make mine 8 inches long, even though, again, it's more of a preference type thing. And because I have one material call on all of the countertops, just one for each of the, or one for this countertop, it applies to all of them here. And so that's fine. We're going to go back to the elevation view next. Okay, and then we're going to pull in another one of those finish calls, and we're going to start labeling our cabinets here. So upper cabinets, like we said, those are PL1, so I don't have to change what's in this bubble. I'm going to label that, throw it right here, right on top of my cabinet. And I kind of like to throw it in the corner, but space it a little bit from the edge of that corner, maybe like an inch or two off of there. Also, please bear in mind, if you do have a laminate that is grained, we will have to provide that grain direction. And I know we talked about it earlier because I dropped that little hint to myself here. All the upper cabinets will have vertical grain, so we need to throw in a grain direction symbol. That is also located in your on-site annotation tab here. So grain direction, you have a vertical and a horizontal here that you can pull from. We're going to take the vertical and we're going to drop it on our print right here. Place it next to your material call and move it a little bit off to the side. All right, then we're going to take that same material call using the copy command, and I'm going to paste it down here onto our base cabinet. Base cabinets are all labeled as PL2 according to the architect's drawing, so we want to make sure that we do change that out. And PL2 is not a grained laminate. You can refer to the material log to find that out. We did that in an earlier video, so I'm not going to go about doing that right now, but it is something to at least keep in mind here. All right, so each cabinet, all the uppers are all PL1, all the lowers are PL2. I have that labeled on here now, so as long as these are all the same, I can use one label for all of these and one label for all of these. One more thing I just noticed before we move on to the section views, as we're labeling the elevation view, I want to make sure I put the equipment name on here. And so to do that, I'm going to copy this text box that I already made for the finished end. I'm going to paste it right here. And I'm going to type in this text box what this equipment is. So as we've referred to this before, it's labeled as AP2. AP2 is in this this appliance schedule as appliance 2, and it is a GE refrigerator by others. So we're going to put B/O, meaning that it is provided by others there. I'm also going to continue by adding, let's see, probably should have made this an M text actually. I'm going to do that real quick. Meaning in M text, it has multiple lines of text to it. So GE refrigerator, okay, by others. And then we're going to put in a little bit more information here. I don't really mind what the finish of it is really per se, but I do want to put the dimensions of that refrigerator here. And that is 69 7/8 tall or high by 32 3/4 wide by 31 inches deep. I'm going to throw that in here because that's important to me to make sure I pass that information on to any other department that's going to be working on this after what I do here. So if I have that information, I want to make sure that people after me have that information too. So there's that. Another label we can throw in. Oops, I'm going to copy this text over. And we're going to write tile backsplash by others. Because as we looked at the elevation view before, they call that out as T5, and T5 is a ceramic tile by somebody else. We don't ever really do any tile work. Last thing I want to add here is I'm going to use this command called leader, which is going to give me an arrowhead. And I'm going to point to one of these outlets and say that this here is electrical outlet by others here. And what I'll actually do as well is write TYP after that, which stands for typical, meaning if there's multiples of these, that it just means that across the board, typical, all these electrical outlets are by somebody else. Okay, that's it for labels on here. Sorry, I should have mentioned that earlier, but I wanted to make sure we caught that here. Moving on down the list, we've got our material dimensions here, material dimensions here. We need to go to, oh, wait, one sec. We need to add a pole call for the cabinet poles. I'm going to do that here in our elevation view, and then we'll move on to the next view, section views for the materials there, if there's any that need to be called out. So the poles on this job, going back to the material log, they are in the hardware section of this project, and that is the only pole on the job, which is hardware 53. So on our print, when we go to here, we're going to write over this instead of PL2, it's going to say HW53. Okay, then once I hit OK and save changes to that, there's a little drop down on the bubble that you can also turn on an arrow. So it gives you a leader to point to something here. And I need to make sure I'm pointing to the actual pole itself. And it can just be on one of them. It doesn't have to be on every single pole. So as long as I have one pointed out, that's what really matters. So hardware 53, that's what that is. All right, let's move on to the section views now and see what we have over here that we need to label. There may not actually be much to label, honestly, because most of these will be covered by your general notes later on. But one thing that we will need is that we're going to need to label, let's see. I think we do need to label the hardware for the ADA bracket here. And going back to our page notes over here, that would be either the HW21 or HW22. That's the white or the black toe kick bracket. Now, how to know which one to use? Again, this is a base cabinet. The base cabinets are using PL2. So we're going to go back to our material log, look up PL2, and just see what that material looks like. If it's a light colored laminate, we're going to use white melamine and a white toe kick. If it's a dark colored laminate, which it looks like it is, we're going to use a black melamine interior, and we're going to use a black toe kick bracket for that. So now that we have that information, let's go ahead and label it as hardware 22, which will be the black bracket. So I need to double click in my viewport, go into my Ansite annotation tool palette, and pull out a finish symbol. We're going to label this as hardware 22. I'm just going to go ahead and resize this a tiny bit. Maybe that's a little much. All right, then we'll add an arrow to it. If the arrow is on the incorrect side, like it's right now for me, it's pointing the wrong way, I'm going to use the mirror command to flip it so it's facing the correct direction, just like that. And then I'm just going to point to that bracket and say what that is. Because the hinge and the pole are labeled on the well, the pole is labeled on your elevation view, and the hinge, the slides, those types of hardwares will all be labeled on your page notes. There is nothing more that we need to label for hardwares and finishes here, which is great. So we'll go back through. I'm going to save real quick, and we're going to go back through our last pass through, which is going to be adding elevation and section calls to our drawing. So this pass through, let's go ahead, double click in there, and we're going to grab the elevation call from our on-site tool palette here for annotated objects. And it's facing the incorrect way, so be careful to make sure that as you go to change that direction of the arrow on this elevation call, you want to make sure it's pointing towards what you're looking at. So it needs to be pointing this way, but you don't want to use the rotate command to flip it, because if you do that, what's going to happen is the text will also rotate with it, and you don't want that because your text will find its way upside down, and you don't want that. So what you're going to do is you're going to click on the elevation call, and there's a circular grip on it that lets you actually turn it. So you're going to turn it to face the drawing that you're looking at. Then you're going to take this and you're going to change the number on it to match what the number is of the elevation view that you're pointing out. So that is view number 2 on L1.0. Something that's important to note too, which we're going to talk about here in just a quick sec, is if you have views that are on a different sheet, like our section views that are on a separate sheet at the end, we actually have to modify something in the section call here, which I'm going to talk about here in just a sec. So again, rotate it using that circular grip so it's facing the right way. And the thing I was just mentioning was this gray box here. Anytime you see a gray box around text in AutoCAD, it is a formula, and it's referring to something else on another part of the print. However, there is really no way to update this to read the second page. It's always referring to the tab of the page that that section call is on. So unfortunately, what we have to do is we have to break that formula for this one, because our section call or our section views are on page L1.1. I want to make sure I have that right. So I'm going to type over where it says L1.0 and write L1.1. And you also want to make sure that this top number is correct as we're pasting this through and adding this section call to our drawing. So what I'm going to do here is paste that there. And I'm going to carry these through. So I'm only going to call out one for each type of section that I'm using. So right here, I have my shorter upper cab and my taller upper cab. Let's go back to our second page just to confirm. The shorter upper cabinet is 1 on L1.1. The taller upper cabinet is 2 on L.1, or L1.1, sorry. So I'm going to update this to say 2 on L1.1. And then from there, I need to copy these section calls down to my base cabinets. Being careful you don't overlap a lot of your dimensions or your view as much as possible. You want to try to avoid that. Let's go ahead and make sure that we have the right number for that view. It should be view number 3. I did go from left to right on purpose, the same way I did here. So as I'm going through and labeling my views, it's going to be really nice and easy to read, because it's going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So everything's going to match up really nicely. But it is important to double check your work anyway, just to make sure that you have these numbers right, because it's one of the easiest things for people to miss when they're drawing something is these numbers here. These numbers are very, very easy to mix up. So just be very careful when you're putting these on your print that these do match to the correct view. It's view 5, which is that one there. And then last but not least, view 6 is your trash cabinet. All right, view 6. All right. When it loads, Sometimes it takes a minute. Okay, so all of our section calls have been applied. All of our one elevation view elevation call has been applied here too. So we actually have all of our elevation and section calls added. There's nothing further to add, so that's our third pass through. I'll continue this here because I wanted to make sure we could get this wrapped up today. So I'm going to finish up by adding in the general notes and also the I also want to add in the finishes and hardwares here as well. So one thing that I like to do when I'm drawing something is to make sure that I don't forget any of the finishes or hardwares on the drawing that I have. What I like to do is actually take a sticky note and kind of label out what I've been using so far. So this helps right now because we've already got some of it labeled. So like we have used SS1. So I'm writing that on my notepad here. We've used PL1. We've used PL2 for finishes. All right. And then inside of our cabinets, we know that we are using black melamine because these laminates were darker. So we're going to use MEL, BLK. Then we can kind of go through the list of hardwares now that we've covered all the finishes. And let's start by looking at our section views. That's the easiest place to start. So we have hinges, so we need to make sure that we're using our standard hinge, which is hardware 4-120. So I'm going to write that down. Whenever you use a hinge, it's important to note that you're also going to use this hinge plate, hardware 1-0. If you have any cabinets that are butted next to a wall, you're going to use hardware 2, and we'll talk about how to call that out as well. We have one cabinet that does that, so we're going to make sure we do that here. The ADA cabinet here, they did require that we use hardware, or 170-degree opening hinge, so we're going to use a hardware 4-170 for that. Already racking up a list of hardwares here. So we have drawers on this project too. So we're going to label hardware 6, but hardware 6 has a drop down that allows you to select the length of the slide. So we need to make sure what is the slide length that we're supposed to be using on the job. It looks like our drawer boxes are 20 inches deep, and same with this one too. So we're going to use hardware 6-20. All right. We don't have any vanity screens, so we're not going to use that really funky hardware 9 and hardware 10. We do have adjustable shelf pins in some of our cabinets, so we will need hardware 11 for that. We didn't use any magnetic touch latches here, so we're good on those. We don't need any of that stuff. We didn't have any file drawers, so none of that's relevant here. These poles are not being used. Those are generic poles. Z-clips are not being used here either, so we could skip over that. But we do have hardware -22. That is that bracket that fits in the ADA cabinet's toe kick to attach the toe kick to the door of the cabinet. We're also going to be using hardware 24, which is the button fix. Again, that is used in the trash cabinet. So specifically looking at this detail here, that would be this hardware right there. And also from the top down right there. So moving on down the list, we didn't use any sort of in-wall steel brackets, so we're good on that. We don't have any sauce hinges because we're not dealing with any real doors. No coat shelves on this, so nothing there. No locks, so we could skip over pretty much that entire section. No undermount slides for like printer pullouts or anything like that, so we're good on those. No Velcro because we're not dealing with any banquette cushions or anything like that. No K and V standards and brackets, so there's nothing there for us. Here's something that we do need though. We do need our trash can, and that is going to be the Rubbermaid 2957 as shown in our section view over here. So we need to add that hardware to our list. And specifically, we want to make sure that we're matching the cabinet. I want to match the garbage can to the cabinet interior. So we're going to use the Hardware 51 Black for that. So let me write that down too. 51 BLK. All right. Then we get to the bottom of the list. We have liners, which only get used for planters. So we don't have any of that here. And then we have these tape ease profiles, which are only used on radiused or curved objects, and we don't have any of that going on here either. So, all right. Now that we have that list, it's probably hard to see because let me go to my model space, maybe that'll be easier to see. I have that list put together here. That is all the hardwares and finishes that we are going to be using on this specific drawing. So what we're going to do now is we're going to fill out the page notes with this information. So going back to our paper space here, let's go to finishes and hardwares and start dropping these in. So copy SS1. That was the first material on my list here. And then we need PL1 and PL2. If you can get by with putting spaces between these, it is preferred. It is not required. And in fact, I think we're not going to have enough space anyway to do that. So I'm going to make these single line instead of double lined. So we're not going to put spaces between these. How I'm bringing these over too, by the way, is I'm using the copy command to do that. So what I'm doing here is I'm using copy, clicking on the hardware or finish that I want, and then I'm using the base point of where the green grid meets, and that intersection point is going to line up right here. So I'm kind of using that as a way to bring these over really quickly. So sorry if I didn't really explain that. I kind of do that with these pretty quickly. So it's kind of a bad habit. I should have stopped and kind of thought about that a little more. But yeah, I'm using that copy command with the base point of that grid, pasting it over here. And I'm just doing my little sort of shopping list here, going through what I need for this drawing. So this one has a drop down attached to it. This is the hardware 4 hinge, and you can buy this with a 120-degree opening. You can also buy it with a 170-degree opening too. So we have that as a drop down. If you need both of those, you want to show both of them on your print, you can click on that and drop down and get to that. All right, so we've done hardware 1, 4, 2. We need hardware 6, which is the drawer slide. We're going to pull that on over. And we need to use the drop down again to select the specific slide that we're using. So hardware 6-20. And then we're going to move on to the shelf pins, which is hardware 11. Where is that? There we go. All right. Then hardware 22 and hardware 24. We are filling this list up pretty extensively here. Once we get into cabinets too, by the way, cabinets don't have nearly as much hardware to them. So if this seems a little overwhelming looking at this, it's okay. Cabinets do have a ton of hardware associated with them. So don't feel like this is a little too crazy because later on there'll be drawings with less than this too. So, all right, we've got all of our finishes and hardwares pulled in. Oh, except for the pull, I forgot to write that down. So we need the cabinet pull, which was hardware 53. Then what we're going to do is go up to the general notes, and we're going to fill out that information up there. So general notes are pretty easy to follow once you get the hang of it. What you want here is you want the self-close hinge note. So all self-close hinges are 4-120 unless noted otherwise, or UNO. Then you have your all hinges on ADA cabinets are 4-170 UNO unless noted otherwise. You're going to need, let's see, you're going to need this note here. This is all cabinet doors marked with an asterisk to receive hardware 2. And speaking of that, since we're talking about that one, we'll take a quick break there. The cabinet that does need hardware 2, actually there's 2 of them now that I'm looking at it. We have this cabinet here, and we have this cabinet door here. Because these cabinet doors are going to open towards a drywall wall, you want to make sure that we put that asterisk on that so that we note that that is going to need hardware 2. So it makes the hinge not open more than 90 degrees. So I'm going to write text, drop in a text box, and whoops, hold on. I don't know how that happened. That was crazy. Drop in an asterisk. Now, I usually make this a little bit bigger. So to do that, you can use the scale command, SCALE, and increase the size of it. Now, you don't have to go crazy with it. I usually make it about 5 times as large as what it was. And then I usually try to move it so it's somewhat in the corner of the cabinet, so it's not out in the open, but not also overlapping anything. We're going to paste one of these also over here on this cabinet door because this cabinet door also opens into a wall. You want to make sure that doesn't cause any issues later. So that's your asterisk there, which pertains to that note we just put on the general notes here. All right, moving down the list, we also have the slide note. So we're skipping over the vanity. We're going right to the slides. This is hardware 6, meaning that all self-close slides on this project are hardware 6 unless noted otherwise. Then we have all adjustable shelves to receive hardware 11 shelf pins spaced 32 millimeters on center. Then we have our interior cabinet finish, meaning that all the interior cabinet finishes need to be MEL BLK. And I did include that here, just double checking to make sure. I had that there as well. This countertop is solid surface, so we will not be scribing it to the wall, just a heads up. But we do have a ADA sink cabinet that does need to be scribed to the floor. And we also need this note too. Might as well grab them both over here. This one is for the trash tops to be attached with hardware 24. So any trash cabinets will have hardware 24 attachment brackets to attach the lid to the drawer box. Skipping over the banquette because we don't have any of those notes and we don't have any die walls here. We can skip over all of that. We do have these notes here, which are scribe all finish base to the floor by 1 inch. All finish base is going to be provided in lengths, and all finish base is going to be on Medex core. Again, that is to prevent water damage and mold growth on the base trim when we use Medex core. And then over here, we have this one that says all walls, floors, and in-wall blocking are by others. That's really important too, and that's usually used on almost every drawing. So that's just noting that we are not responsible for the walls or the floors on this print. I actually am going to put this note here, GC to specify equipment, because we never really got an official spec number for the refrigerator. I would like to have that to make sure that it really is going to fit within the space they asked for. It's nice that they gave us dimensions for it, but we really need all the information to make sure that we're not going to undersize that opening by accident. These are for metal shop drawings, which we don't have anything to do with that here. And then these ones, we're going to see if we can fit these in. These are for the cabinet poles. we are going to need all three of these. So in order for that to work, your page notes may have to shift a little bit. I'm going to use the move command here, and I'm going to lower these down. And also you can shift the location of that finish and hardware part by using this little arrow here, which I bet we could probably make this work. It's going to be tight. We might not have just enough room, but we'll see. Oh, it might just be crazy enough to work. Hey, look at that. We have one line to spare. That's insane. Well, I'm glad that it worked out. All right, so all of our hardwares, all of our finishes, and all of our general notes are in the page notes over here. If you ever have any questions with those, please let me know. I will be happy to walk through that with you. One thing that we're going to do, though, as well, before we move on and call this done, is when you fill out your page notes, you got to make sure that you put them on both drawings if you have multiple sheets. So what I'm going to do is highlight all of this. And I'm going to copy using the copy base command. And what I'm going to do is use a common base point. So this corner here will work out just fine. Use that. Go to my next page and hit Control V on my keyboard, which will allow me to snap it to that same base point we selected. And I still have to move this too. So like the other drawing we had, I moved this down to here. I want to make sure that that matches up. Okay, so we're actually done, believe it or not, with this drawing. There's nothing more to add as far as I know at this point. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you how to publish this drawing. And then I think what we're going to do is Monday morning when I get back in, I'm going to run through our drawing checklist, which I'll provide to you too. And I'm going to check to make sure that I didn't forget anything on this and that everything is covered because I don't want to mess anything up there. So what I'm going to do right now is to first I'm going to save it, make sure I don't lose any of my work. And then I'm going to go up to the AutoCAD logo here. Come on. There it goes. And then down to where it says publish. You're going to click on publish. And the first time you do this, your settings may vary a little bit from what mine look like here. If you would like to pause the video here, make sure that all these drop downs match what I have here. And including these two. Make sure that these are all checked the same as what I have here on my screen. See you, Trey. Have a good weekend. Then after you've made sure that all of these drop downs match up with what we need, what you're going to do is you see here in the middle, you have all your sheet names. Those sheet names are the tabs that are down here at the bottom. So as you go through, go ahead and take the one that says model. That is actually your model space, and you don't want to put that on your drawing. That's like that's going to print like the entire blank space in the model space. You don't want that. So you're going to click on where it says model space and hit this little red subtract / remove sheet icon. Get rid of that, but keep these two. These are your actual drawing tabs that are down here. Once you've selected or removed that from your sheet selection and you have all these settings saved, you're going to go ahead and hit publish. It's going to ask you where you want to save the PDF file. So going back to what we talked about earlier on, we're going to go to the OSW drive. Then we're going to go find our job folder. So Legislative Office Building. We're going to go to Drawings. And we're going to save this drawing in the New Drafting Files folder. That is where all of the drafting PDFs will go before they're checked. So they're going to go into this folder here. And you want to make sure that your label is correct. It's going to match the same file name as what we did for the AutoCAD file. So it's going to be L1, which is your print reference, PKT followed by your packet number, then laminate casework, which is the description of the drawing, and then followed by level, storage room, which is the room name and the room number there. And then you still want to make sure that you have that version 1.0 at the end. That is going to be the key indicator that this is the first draft of this drawing. So once all this is typed out correctly, which it should come in by that anyway, already by typed in like the way that it is. So you can go ahead and hit select then and save it right there in the new drafting files folder. It will then open in Bluebeam, so you can see it over here, the finalized drawing in all its glory. So you can see that there. All of your fancy page notes, all of your hardwares, all of your labels, everything is there. And so what I'm going to do now is go ahead and close out of this. Once I have finished a drawing, typically what I'm going to do then is I'm going to run through the drawing checklist. The drawing checklist is pretty dry as far as the read goes. It's not very it's not very user friendly right now. We're going to be updating it here very soon to actually like be more visual, to be able to understand a little better. But what you would typically do is you'd run through that checklist, make sure that you've gotten everything done. All of your notes are there, all of your finishes are there, all of your elevation section calls all match up to what they need to. I'll get you that list so you can see what that is. But once you've gone through that checklist and you're done with the drawing, when you're ready for it to be checked, go ahead and go to your drafting schedule, find your name on there, and then find that specific packet that drawing is related to, and then mark it as review. What will happen is it will disappear from your list. It goes away temporarily at least, and you won't see it again unless there are corrections to it or there are any red lines to it later on when the architect reviews it. So that's how that works. So I've saved that drawing to new drafting files, marked it as review, and then I can kind of wipe my hands clean from it for right now. And that's about all there is to it. So I know that's quite a bit. This video is probably a little bit longer than the rest of them, but it had a lot of really important information in there. So I wanted to make sure that we got through that this week. And so at the beginning of next week, if you're trying to work ahead here, you have a little bit more to get caught up on. Anyways, I'm going to end it here for the week for training. And we'll leave off with that. Next week, we'll run through that drafting checklist. And then from there, we'll probably pick up another cabinet drawing to work on. But for right now, that's where I'm going to leave it. My throat is killing me, and I can't really talk much more. So, yep, we'll call it here. We'll pick back up next week.